Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at simbody.com. You're really, really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
You know the guys from Fight Night Picks for their weekly UFC previews and predictions, live shows like Question Mark Kicks and the Sidekick. Thanks to your support, they're adding a new show to the channel. If you're an MMA fan, you're going to want to join in the action of Dana White's Contender series. So as they always say, let's get into it.
Up. There we go. Now we're into it, Matt. Listen,
how's it going, everyone?
Dana White's Contender Series, it is going down, and it's going on this week. I mean, this is the second week. We're in the thick of it, and of course, you have a big-time main event coming up this weekend. Charlie Campbell, I say this weekend. I'm so used to saying this weekend with these shows. Charlie Campbell taking on Chris Duncan over in the comment section already. Ethan Schneider, Blind Dog, Butter Toast, John Doe, Akashdeep. Dustin's hanging out. Matt, this is one of those shows. It's a lot of fun. And obviously, we threw the channel out there, years and years ago. Never really thought that Dana White's Contender Series was going to pop off like it has. And of course, we've seen some big-time prospects make it through the ranks on Contender Series. Obviously, you have Jeff Neal competing in the co-main event this weekend against Vicente Luque. Neal, a Contender Series alum. Sean O'Malley. The list is very, very long. Sometimes the fighters don't have a lot of success, but when you do look at it, I mean, last week, Dana White definitely threw out an ultimatum. In his words, I quote, "I don't watch anything on anybody before they come here.
Wow.
I don't care what you did in your career the last 5 years. What are you going to do tonight?"
That sounds like the Phoenix Suns with their draft philosophy. They came out and said, yeah, we don't really care about the draft anymore.
Well, Branch
Just
Above's
a wild thing to admit.
Branch Above's having a good time over there saying, "What's up, guys?" But yeah, I mean, Butter Toast really hitting the nail on the thun. Geez whiz. Dan Goldstein, this is the Joe Pfeiffer of Dana White's Contender Series shows. It definitely is, and I mean, he was in attendance for the pay-per-view, and they put the camera right on him, and he got a pretty big pop, too.
He really did a great job promoting himself the last week since his fight. By far the most impressive performance of that first week of Contender Series. Being a real game opponent, too. It's not like he just went in there like a minus 700 favorite and got the dub. Like,
no, he's the underdog.
Exactly. Joe Pfeiffer looked phenomenal. He had really nice boxing. We all know how his ground game's going to continue to grow, and I'm really excited to see him further his UFC career because I don't think he's going to be one of those one-and-done guys. I can really see Joe Pfeiffer being around for a good amount of time in that middleweight division.
And Artem MMA Analysis, again, with another great point. Him against Alan Amedovski.
Yeah, they gave him a underhand toss.
Who hasn't won a fight in over 4 years and has lost 3 fights in the UFC, all by finish. That's a win for Joe Pfeiffer. And, like, I don't even need to see the fight. I can just tell you that much. It's like Terrence McKinney, Eric Gonzalez.
But the good news is on this weekend's main event, if you look, or I did the exact same thing you did. If you look at today's main event, I should say, Charlie Campbell versus Chris Duncan is going to be a really fun fight, though. And I could really see the winner of that getting the contract no matter what, just because they do fight in such an exciting manner. A lot of people are going to remember Duncan for his fight against Slava Claus. It was pretty good until it ended. We all know how good of a striker Slava Borshev is. His striking is absolutely insane, so it'll be nice to see how Duncan can come back at the biggest stage, because unless he's, I don't even know who, like, you don't really get this opportunity multiple times. You get your one chance on Contender Series. If you look good, you might get signed. If you don't, it might be a very long road to get back. So I think that fight against Charlie Campbell is going to be a very fun one to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, Chris Duncan finished in last season of Dana White's Contender Series by a really game Slava Borshev. And if you look at it, Shimon Smotrisky as well finished in, under a minute by Mike Malott in his fight. And what we do on this show, we're going to go down through all 5 fights. we're going to offer up one pick. You get one pick out of both of us, and maybe it could end up being in the same fight. Maybe it's going to be in different fights. The odds were indifferent to those, but some good opportunities for everybody here. Dancing, I think Waldo versus the other guy could go longer than we expected. That's going to be one of those fights where it could be great, it could be bad. We're just going to find out. But we're going to break this one down. I'm going to offer you up just a little blurb on all 5 of the fights. We're going to break down our pick, and then we're going to get out of here. We're going to send you packing. It's a short show. It's nothing compared to our full card picks, but as you saw from the start, Santos versus Hill is this coming weekend. After we're done this Dana White's Contender Series show, we're going to tape our videos. They're going to come out tomorrow, of course. So let's run down through this card very quickly. First fight on the card, 7-2 Billy Goff taking on 6-1 Shimon Smotrisky of Israel. And if you look at it, I mean, Goff, CES middleweight champ, he was able to get that belt back in April. You go down through it, he took on Dana White's Contender Series alum Justin Sumter, a guy who I thought was going to have a decent run, but really didn't. So he gets the win over there. He's putting his 5-fight win streak on the line against Smotrisky, who lost, of course, to Malat last season. Came back and got a win not that long ago at RCC 10, and he took on UFC vet William Macario, a name that a lot of people might recognize, guy on The Ultimate Fighter Brazil Season 2, lost in the finale to the GOAT, Leonardo Santos, but beat Thiago Santos in that season. So a big win for Smotrisky, getting the win over Macario. That fight against Billy Goff and Smotrisky should be a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are going to talk about Goff winning that fight. Man, I think Goff's going to have a really hard fight in that one.
He's probably going to have a hard fight, but this does kind of feel like one of those Dana White's favorites. You know what I mean? Billy Goff does have some very nice technical skills. He's a big fighter for this division too, and that's what stood out. Against the majority of his competition, he was the much bigger and much more physically imposing fighter. So I'm going to be curious to see how and if that can transfer over to the UFC if he is able to make it to that level.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting too, because when you do look at Billy Goff, middleweight his last time out. You got the welterweight in Smotrisky. This fight at 170. Both guys, no issues with anybody making weight this week. Nobody coming in 11 pounds over the weight limit, so good stuff to see. Your next fight at heavyweight, Waldo Cortes-Acosta. He's undefeated. He's taking on Danilo Suzart of Life Artes Marcias in Brazil, a main training partner of one former UFC heavyweight, Matt's favorite heavyweight fighter, Carlos Felipe. And if you look at it for Danilo Suzart, his last time out, picks up the Aris FC heavyweight belt, wins a majority decision in that one.
Close fight.
His opponent out-wrestled him at the start, and then he started to slow down, and as he slowed down, Suzart picked it up. But a wild striker, taking on the former pro boxer, Waldo Cortes-Acosta, picked up a big-time LFA title in his last time out against Thomas Peterson, the hometown guy. They were booing Cortes-Acosta. By the end of it, there were some golf claps in that one, because he was looking really good.
He really was, and that's the thing for Waldo. He could be great, but there is a little part of me that does worry because his power is phenomenal when he's able to land his power shots. It's just the delivery system isn't all the way there yet, If he was able to work his way in with a bit better of a jab, if he had slightly higher volume, then maybe I could see some of those bigger power shots landing at a more consistent basis. But right now, he does feel like a very raw prospect, so I'm very curious to see how he makes out on tomorrow's show to get a better gauge as to where his ceiling really could be.
Next fight, at 145 pounds, you have undefeated 5-0 squaring off Francis Marshall taking on Connor Matthews. And don't get it twisted, to me, these guys seem like Ultimate Fighter guys. We have the Ultimate Fighter finale coming up this weekend, heavyweight and women's flyweight. These two guys just have experience against lesser levels of competition. I mean, whether it's with CES, Cage Titan, so on and so forth, when I'm talking about Connor Matthews, or for Francis Marshall on some of those lower scales. I mean, you go through their overall records. I mean, 9 of their 10 total wins are by finish combined, and 5 first-round finishes for Matthews, but he's got that dreaded win, his second to last time out. He beat Jay Ellis. And listen, Jeremy Mearshart couldn't do it, but a lot of men have. Over 90 have done it. So big opportunity there, but I think it's going to be a fun fight for what it's worth.
This feels like one of those fights where no matter what happens to the winner, they get a developmental contract and not the real UFC contract. I know they haven't done that as much lately. That was very much a Season 1 and Season 2 platform, but right now I could see them doing that for Marshall or Matthews, because like you said, it feels like an Ultimate Fighter fight, because I'd like to see them 2, 3, 4 more times against some kind of regional levels of talent, because I do really like Marshall's wrestling. I think that's a good X factor that he can bring to the cage, and for Connor Matthews, he has nice striking when he is able to put his combinations together to their fullest effect. But again, they're both these skill sets that I'd like to see a few more times before they get that shot at the bigger show.
Zach G, let's go, boys. 40K coming right up. If you're not subscribed, what are we doing here? Just do it. The next fight, the co-main event, Shannon Ross. Listen, this is the one where I went down through it. He's 13-5. He's 33 years old at flyweight, where you're usually on your way out the door at that point. He hasn't competed at 125 pounds since 2018, and it's a little bit of a head-scratcher of a fight. He's taking on Brazil's Vinicius Salvador. You go down through it. He was 12-4 before he beat a debuting fighter back not that long ago. So beating a debuting fighter at 12-4 gets you an opportunity on Dana White's Contender Series. And for Vinicius Salvador, he's beating guys he should beat. His record's padded. He's lost the guys that are all right.
Exactly.
But, like, I look at this one as, how far off the hill has Shannon Ross fallen? And for Vinicius Salvador, can you pull one out of the hat? Like, that's pretty much how I look at that fight.
That is the wild thing about Salvador and his record. He beats guys who have negative records or records that are around 500, and all of his losses are to anybody who has any good levels of experience under their belt. So this feels like one of those trapdoor fights no matter what, because I do agree with you. Shannon Ross has some nice skills, don't get me wrong, but he is at the age and sort of at the point of his career where you do start to worry about how well he can fight at 125 pounds. And with Vinicius, it's more eye-catching, don't get me wrong, but that's the problem with his whole style. It's that if it looks good, it's going to look great. If it looks bad, it's going to look really bad. If he loses to Shannon Ross on this show, like, I don't really know where his future belongs at all. Because, again, if you just keep on losing anytime you fight people who have good records, but you can beat people who are making their debuts or who are that, like, 2 and 3 type fighters, then I'm very concerned about your overall ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, for Vinicius Salvador, spending time with such promotions as, like, the SFTs of the world, the Jungle Fights, I mean, fought with Max Fight, Pentagon Combat, Arena Global.
Shudo Brazil.
Like, yeah, Shudo Brazil. So every now and again you get a diamond in the rough there, but it really is a tough one. Dev the Dude saying, I got the dog. I don't know. That one's a bit of a toss-up. The main event, though, is probably the best fight on the card. And of course, you know Chris Duncan, he was featured on Dana White's Contender Series last year, got knocked out in the second round against Slava Borchev. But in that fight, they went toe-to-toe. It was a great fight, especially in the rewatch. You look at them, I mean, both these guys, Campbell and Duncan, fought on different Bellator cards. They have quite a bit of Bellator experience. Obviously, Charlie Campbell gets the win over Noah Dung, finishes them by leg kicks. Like, that is a big part of Charlie Campbell's game in general. But when you look at it, better level competition, I'd probably side slightly with Chris Duncan than I would with Charlie Campbell. Listen, the ring light doesn't like to work in this Dana White's Contender Series show.
It doesn't.
It hates it. It works the whole time on the weekend while we're doing it. And now Matt knocks the dogs loose. But when we do look at this fight between Campbell and Chris Duncan, it is a really fun one, and both guys are down to bang. This is probably one that does produce a contract.
Oh, without a doubt. I do think this is probably the best quality of fight we've had on the first week or the second week, just because Duncan and Campbell have that Contender Series style, if you will. They have the style to where if you win, you're probably going to get signed, because you might have got dropped yourself along the way. Like, this is going to be a very entertaining fight, and this is the one that I'd probably put the most tape study into, because I really do think Charlie Campbell could be a good UFC fighter if he is able to get past Chris Duncan in this weekend's main event, or not this weekend, again, I keep on saying it, in tomorrow's main event, and this is why. Chris Duncan has a big flaw in his style. He's a great power puncher. He does load up on his shots a little bit, but when he lets his hands go, he is a great striker. I do like his wrestling. I think it's a very underrated part of his game. It's one of those things where he doesn't feel like just a panic wrestler. He can go out there and get the double leg takedown. He can get the single leg takedown, but he ducks to his right on everything. No matter what you feint, his style is always duck to his right. Now, I was telling Craig before we filmed, it reminds me a lot of when Dustin Poirier has a guy hurt. He's a southpaw fighter, fights with his left hand primarily, but then when he gets somebody hurt, since he is right-handed naturally, he'll go back to his orthodox stance, and a lot of people will remember, he kind of ducks down, he makes himself very compact, and he loads up on his shots. Chris Duncan does that, but in a defensive manner, and that does worry me fighting a guy who I see as a 3-level striker in Charlie Campbell, someone who can go to the legs with his kicks, can go to the body with some of his boxing combinations and his kicks there as well, and he has great boxing combinations to the head, so I do feel like with that one defensive susceptibility that Chris Duncan has, a fighter like Charlie Campbell can start to break him down over time and land some power shots.
And I mean, when I look at Chris Duncan, 16-2 pro and amateur combined, and he's only had 3 fights go to a decision. His first pro decision decision win was his last time out. Kind of a tune-up fight to get back to the stage, and he's since switched camps to American Top Team. So I wonder, actually getting the chance maybe in the room to train with a guy like Dustin Poirier, maybe you're able to shore up some of those holes. And for Charlie Campbell, Sarah Longo, a great camp to be out of too.
The problem I have with Chris Duncan and that camp move, and I do think it's a good idea, but this one I always go back to. Remember when Daniel Cormier openly admitted, I have a problem ducking to my left on head kicks? Told John Jones that, was like, hey, I know you see it in my style, but my coaches and I have been working on it. And then 2 years later, he got caught by that exact technique. That's my problem. I think it's really hard in a very short amount of time to fix something that is so ingrained into your style, because that's the thing that Duncan's done from his first fight all the way up until his last fight. So I do think it's going to take almost years to kind of get that one hitch out of his style.
The one thing that I don't understand in the comments section, Andrew Boniface, you got to try and explain this one a little bit, because you're saying last 5 opponents record for Campbell's 12-12, and if you look at it for Duncan, I mean, he beat 14-7 Mateusz Prekors. He beat Yamike Furtado, who was 6-3. He beat Jonathan Carlos, who's 6-4 his last time out. So I don't really get where you're going with that one. But overall, I think that one's really competitive. I mean, are you making your pick on that main event fight?
I am. I hate to be the new, Jeff Wagenheim of Contender series and act like I only know the main event, but I really do think Charlie Campbell is a UFC-ready talent. That's really what I'm looking for on this show and trying to predict how they get to the UFC, because here's the thing. A lot of these fighters are probably going to have great performances this one time, but like you said, not everybody's a Jamal Hill. Not everybody's a Jeff Neal. There are some fighters on this card who they get that contract, and then 2 or 3 fights later, we never really hear from them again. I do not think Campbell's going to be that type of fighter. I do expect him to get the win tomorrow, and I do think he can have success at the UFC level.
Anthony L saying Duncan's weak EU wrestling ain't going to be able to be effective against Campbell, and his training is too good. I mean, you're talking about weak EU wrestling. Look at Mateusz Gamrot's wrestling in the UFC. It works out pretty damn well. So I will kind of zig to that zag, but when I do focus on a pick for this, a lot of people are kind of pointing it out as we were running through this card. Waldo Cortes-Acosta is taking on Danilo Suzart. And when I went down through this one, I hate to be that guy because Cortes-Acosta is one of the biggest favorites that's on this card. I mean, if we look at it for the main event, Matt, you made the pick last week. Pfeiffer was the underdog. Chris Duncan's an underdog in his fight, plus 133. Charlie Campbell, minus 159. Cortes-Acosta coming in a giant favorite, minus 392. But when I was doing the tape study on all of these different fights, and I wanted to make a pick where, hey, I think I'm going to be right on this one. For Danilo Suzart, you watch this guy fight, he marches forward, occasionally throws a kick, and just clubs his overhand right to close distance. He's the least technical heavyweight fighter that you're going to find, and I understand it's squeaky record, so on and so forth, but I went down through his fights. I mean, listen, neither one of these guys has the best striking defense. Both guys have fairly poor takedown defense. I don't expect either guy to take the other guy down. When I look at it for the man out of the DR, Waldo Cortes-Acosta, I mean, much better level of competition than he was beating, because if you look at it for Danilo Suzart, and I really hold that in a high regard, yes, he won the Aris belt his last time out. Yes, you had Robin Black speaking in riddles in that one.
He loves doing that.
And I did write down a couple of different things that he had said on the fight card, but if you do look at it, he beats Benjamin Sahik by majority decision in that fight, gets taken down a lot at the start. Sahik kind of runs out of fuel, but before that, beating 0-0 debuting fighter in 2021, Glimar Blade. He beat Benicio Diaz, who was 0-2 back in 2021. He just wasn't fighting a great level of competition. Then when I do look at it for Waldo Cortes-Acosta, again, combined opponents record for both these guys. For Suzart, 11-10 out of the wins. For Waldo Acosta, 43-24. If you watch it, I mean, he did have a pro boxing record at 6-4, which isn't the sexiest.
I gotta be honest, I didn't really expect that out of him, just due to the looping nature of his shots. Normally when we do see people with a boxing background, they're a little bit cleaner, a little bit crisper with their boxing, so I'm surprised to hear that, that's all.
Yeah, when I did look at it for Waldo Cortes-Acosta, though, really does like to pump the jab out there, throw a looping right hand, and that's the one where a guy with a straight shot's going to counter him. Or when he's throwing that looping shot, you can go for the level change and take him down. But when I'm focusing on a fighter to try and think, okay, is this guy UFC ready? Obviously, Hamdi Abdel Wahab surprised everybody last week because I didn't think he was going to do what he did in his fight, and didn't he look great against Don'Tale Mayes? But I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta is one of those guys that you drop him in between 25 and 20, somewhere in there. You fight a guy that's unranked, and I think he could have some halfway competitive fights. He's going to have a hard time against, 14th ranked Augusto Sakai is fighting this weekend against
Of
unranked.
course, that guy on Contender Series would have trouble with Augusto Sakai.
Against unranked Sergey Spivak. But when I do look at it, for Waldo Cortes-Acosta, I think he's probably the guy that's going to be able to get it done. And the one big thing, and I think it's going to be an X factor in this fight, yes, Danilo Suzart could club him with one of those overhand rights that he throws. Suzart has poor cardio himself. He throws a lot of single shots, whereas Waldo Cortes-Acosta likes to try and throw in more combination. I love the fact that Cortes-Acosta throws a leg kick and doesn't have a big reset on it. He keeps his hands in a nice spot, doesn't drop them really low to then get countered. So for me, Waldo Cortes-Acosta to get the win, that's my pick for the week. And for you, you're going with the man and Charlie Campbell in the main event.
I do like that pick. I think it's going to be a really fun show, though, in all honesty. I do expect this one to be a little bit better entertainment-wise than the last weekend's show, because that was the thing. By the time we got to the main event, I'm like, please be a good fight. Just please be a good fight between two good fighters. And it was. So I'm expecting this show to have a lot more UFC-ready talent on it.
If you're going to go back and watch some tape study, this was the quotable that you should look for in that Ares fight that Suzart said. This was by Robin Black. There is no right or wrong necessarily. There is outcomes and consequences. Robin Black. Wow. I'm going to leave you with that. Listen, we have a big time card coming up this week on Dana White's Contender Series. That one's tomorrow. But we also have Santos versus Jamal Hill coming up this weekend. The video is going to drop tomorrow. It'll premiere as always. Be sure to drop your thoughts. Comment under all of these videos. Do all that great stuff. But listen, thanks so much for tuning in. These Dana White's Contender Series shows are a lot of fun. They're a lot quicker than what we're usually used to. And yeah, I think it should be a good one.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Listen, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.